who do want to open up earlier. Are you one of them?
No, but I am very, very cautious about the way in which Parliament has given to the executive these extraordinary draconian wartime powers. And so, for example, I declined to support the government on the 6-month extension. I thought a 3-month extension would be sensible. But I'm not in a dissimilar place to the other two panelists, to Jenny and to John, because I think we've got to be cautious, and we don't want to blow it now, because we are doing very well on the vaccination programme. The numbers are all moving in the right direction. So my view is we should stick to the roadmap that's been laid out. We shouldn't rush it. Stick to that roadmap, and also to the Prime Minister's words that we are not going to lock down again, and that this is the safe and sure way of proceeding.
I mean, not ideal circumstances for any political leader to come into the job. How do you think he's done so far?
Well, first of all, let me be clear that I think that the job of the leader of the opposition is one of the most difficult, most awful jobs in the world. And I had 5 years sitting alongside David Cameron when he was the leader of the opposition. And it's a terrible, terrible job. And it's extraordinarily difficult. So having said that, I imagine that the hearts of every single Labour activist and member of Parliament sank to their boots when they read the article that William Hague wrote in The Telegraph, and I think they've all read it, about 2 weeks ago, when he said that Keir Starmer is in exactly the same position as he was in 1997. And, I think there's some truth in that. The Labour Party is very much in flux. And what is the Labour Party's big idea at the moment? It is to help with levelling up. Well, that is the defining feature of Boris's government. It is to level up. It is to explain to people in the red wall seats that we know perfectly well they've only lent us their votes. They've voted Labour in the past, and we've got to deliver them. So I think he's in an extraordinarily difficult position. And, he is in danger of being painted into the place of being a North London metropolitan Ramona lawyer, and that's not going to resonate. And he's up against a Prime Minister who is a one-off. And, Boris, I remember during the general election going to campaign in some of the red wall seats in the West Midlands. And I would say to people, are you voting Conservative? And they would say, no, I'm voting for Boris. And there's this extraordinary phenomenon in British politics. You only have to look at the reporting over the weekend of Boris. Any other Prime Minister would have been put in a cannon and sent into outer space. Boris is completely different. He's a brand, really. And I think being up against Boris, particularly for a pretty straight-laced character like Keir Starmer, is an exceedingly difficult task. So I don't want to enter into private grief in the Labour Party, but I do think it's a terrible job, and he's trying to conduct it in extraordinarily difficult circumstances when the weather is very much against him.
Andrew Mitchell, so when you hear some of the commentators on this today, I was talking to Simon Woolley, who you will know for Operation Black Vote. It's extremely concerning in that they think this has been effectively, if you forgive the phrase, a bit of a whitewash of a report. And you look at some of the conclusions, and you have to say that there aren't very many meaningful ones and recommendations for action.
Well, good evening, Iain, and good evening, Jenny and John. Let me start with what John said, which I think is extremely important, which is that there is no doubt this is against a background of progress being made in this area. And I represent a royal town which is right on the edge of Britain's second city, Birmingham, which is a huge multicultural success. Birmingham has thrived and prospered over recent years because we have quite outstandingly good relations between the different communities. And so real progress has been made. In Birmingham, that's partly because of the influence of the faith groups, which have been very dominant in ensuring that that is the case. So let's start on the basis that great improvement has been made in recent years. Now, this report is not, of course, a decision of the government. It's a report to government. government. And I have no doubt at all, I haven't read any of it yet, but having listened to some of the reports this morning, that it will create a discussion. And already we've seen some quite negative comments. But I think it's important to keep it in context that it's a report to government, and everyone who's got a view or opinion on this should certainly pile in. And, in Parliament too, for example, I have always been very much opposed to stop and search, as it works, because I think it exacerbates community tension. And I've never really seen an example of why that is a good policy to pursue, or indeed to enhance, which is the current position. And, I'm horrified to hear, I didn't hear Jenny's programme, but it sounded absolutely horrific. But I think the point is we are against the background of this report where things are getting better, and we need to have an open discussion, of which this report is only a part, about where we go next. And then I hope the government will pull all these threads together and ensure that we do start to tackle some of what are undoubtedly clear injustices in terms of the way people are treated, in terms of access to jobs and employment. We have got to make further progress, and I don't think anything in this report should be allowed to suggest that we've made enough progress yet.
But there have been, I think, 9 different reports on all sorts of different aspects of the treatment of ethnic minorities over the last few years. And they're all very worthy. They come up with lots of recommendations as to what should be done. And then they seem to sit on shelves gathering dust. David Lammy has been very critical of, he was commissioned by, I think, David Cameron to do a report on the justice system as it affects ethnic minorities. And the government say they have implemented most of his recommendations. He says they haven't. So, how do we know what the truth is there? But what's the point in commissioning these reports if very little ever happens, Andrew?
Well, I think the language particularly from the Prime Minister about his approach to this report is good. I think it's encouraging. I listened very carefully to David Lammy because I remember when David did that report for David Cameron, and I think what David says is compelling. Indeed, within the House of Commons, he is one of the key voices who people should listen to. And I'm dismayed that his reaction today, which I've seen, is very negative. But I do emphasise that the report is a contribution to a discussion. It's not the answer to any of this. It's a contribution, and people should have their say. And the government, I'm sure, will listen to everything that people have to say before reaching what I hope will be some conclusions which address the point you've just made, because there have been lots of reports, and that, all the intent is good, but we do need to see more action in that respect.
And what about the recommendation that the term BAME is effectively discontinued? Jenny, what was your reaction to that?
I never quite got my head round BAME. I quite often would be writing a script and one of the producers would say, use BAME. And I would say, yeah, but what does it actually mean? Black, Asian, minority, they're all different. If you're